Tensions between China and Australia have escalated further as the two are locked in a Twitter spat. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian on Monday posted a computer-generated artwork depicting an Australian soldier holding a bloody knife to the throat of an Afghan child, referencing alleged war crimes committed by Australian troops in Afghanistan. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison described the post as repugnant and demanded apologies from China, but was rejected. Later, Morrison warned against further amplifying the incident. Meanwhile, reactions from around the world have been polarized. So, to unpack the situation, I'm pleased to be joined from South China's Guangdong City by Hazza Hardin, an Australian who is host for the local TV station, via Skype from London by Scarla Martin-Jakes, visiting professor from Tsinghua University, and from Shanghai, another Australian, Peter Arkell, managing director of Carrington Day, a consulting business focusing on natural resources sector. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. First of all, I just want to say that China rejected Australia's demand for apologies. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Hua Chunying said, Afghan lives matter. The Australian government should conduct honest and deep reflections and hold the perpetrators accountable. It owes the Afghan people a formal apology and a solemn promise that it will never ever commit these horrible crimes again. Peter, the situation is still unfolding, but so far the reaction from the Australian side has been very strong. Help us understand the Australian reaction to the tweet of Zhao Lijian. Exactly what kind of raw nerve was struck to you?
Well, I think the revelation that things have gone very badly in Afghanistan with some Australian forces committing clearly some atrocities has shocked the Australian population very much. The Twitter storm is really a separate issue. I don't think that we can put both things together. I think there's a lot of disquiet in the Australian population that this was an unnecessary intervention in something which was being tackled at home by the Australian government. There'd been an inquiry and things were being addressed. I think China's long history of not wanting to interfere in other countries' affairs probably took people by surprise. Mr. Zhao's Twitter which did inflame sensibilities when the matter was already a matter for great concern for the Australian people.
Hazza, you offered on Twitter, when China demanded an apology, you offered on Twitter to apologize for the Australian government. You even said you were thinking of giving up your Australian nationality over the issue. Of course, you clarified that you were only contemplating on that, not necessarily will do it. But exactly what prompted you to react the way you did?
So my reaction was based on the fact that I felt shame as an Australian, because over the last 12 months we have seen constant negative messaging out of Australia regarding China. And as somebody who is based and works in China, I have seen that China is responding to its issues. That's why there's constant reform here in China. We saw this year that China has eradicated poverty across the entire country. Yet at the same time we've seen constant negativity coming out of Australia. And I agree with your other guest here tonight that the tweet from Mr. Zhao was a little bit of a surprise, because usually China has not been so forward with criticising other countries in the past. But my problem with the reaction from Australia regarding this tweet is that we have a serious issue that we are facing at the moment. The focus should be on the families of those affected by the war crimes, and I don't think that we should have reacted so emotionally to a tweet from China. At the same time, we've seen similar graphics produced by media outlets in Australia. We've also seen articles containing those images retweeted by some elected officials in Australia. So I feel like it's a little bit hypocritical to demand an apology from China for something that we have been doing for more than 12 months.
Peter, you want to react to that? Do you think some of the points that Haza was making were fair?
Look, of course there's been a lot of argy-bargy going on between the two countries over a period of time. I've never seen the relationships between two countries which, on all other fronts, certainly on a business-to-business front, we're good mates. You know, we have a lot to offer each other, and the discourse that's been taking place over the last little while has been pretty unsatisfactory, and it hasn't helped anybody. But I don't think that the intervention of a Twitter storm is going to help to get this sorted out. We have, on one side, the Australians reacting. We've got on the Chinese side, we have them pushing a point. Where do either side see this being sorted out? I only see this Twitter storm as being aggravating and creating even greater division between us, when what we really should be doing is trying to pull us back together again. There's so much work to be done with each other. Certainly from an Australian point of view, I can't see any point in having a blue over this.
Let me go to my guest in the UK, Martin, from a different perspective. What do you think are the issues exactly being talked about, at stake here? For instance, people are talking about whether this is a fake image, whether this is, and China says this is artwork, of course, is a very real life-like, right? Is that an issue? Is that why this tweet caused particular sensitivity issues? How do you look at the intention and the issue of whether this is art versus a real photograph here?
Well, I think this is a completely a side issue, actually. I think the reaction of the Australian Prime Minister was basically he wanted to deflect. He felt that for China to criticize Australia, which is an unusual thing to do, was absolutely out of order. And my own view is, I'm sorry, it's entirely in order for China to express a view about Australia's behaviour in Afghanistan. It's just like any country, it's not just China. But I think the reaction was, well, how dare these Chinese react to what we have done? You know, that's not what the Chinese should do. And I didn't like that. I felt I felt very uncomfortable with that. It seemed to me to have some unfortunate overtones. But of course, the other thing I want to say is that you can't just start with this. The relationship between Australia and China has been deteriorating over quite a period now. And the attacks on China have come essentially from Australia, on a whole range of issues, you know, the origins of the COVID-19, 5G, bullying, deceit. And my view about this is that the Australian government has completely miscalculated. It somehow thought that there would be no consequences, that there would be no backlash for China, there would be no price to pay. And that seems to me to be quite extraordinary.
However,
they've been so naive in relationship to this.
However, Martin, I do have to point out that after China sent out, after Mr. Zhao sent out this tweet, the reaction from several countries, from governments, have actually been quite negative. For instance, we have seen the Prime Minister of New Zealand, for instance, Jacinda Ardern, she said on Tuesday that New Zealand has voiced its concern directly with the Chinese authorities. She said this is an image that wasn't factual, it wasn't correct, and so in keeping with our principal position where images like that are used, we will raise those concerns and we will do it directly. And then the French government also weighed in and described the tweet as unworthy of diplomatic methods and as an insult to all countries whose armed forces had been engaged in Afghanistan. Now, the United States did not express any explicit position on this issue, but the incoming administration indicated that they will use Australian wine in a recent upcoming event, kind of showing solidarity with the Australian side. So, Martin, you have to say, whatever the intention, it seems that the ramifications have been rather negative. Would you say that?
I wouldn't go that far. I have a great deal of respect for Jacinda Ardern. I think she's been a terrific Prime Minister in New Zealand. And she has, she has a great moral voice. So I do listen to her. If you ask me about the tweet, I think it was a mistake to use that image, to be honest with you. I think it was a mistake to use that image. I mean, it doesn't need to be. It could have been a photograph in reality of what was happening. There are plenty of those around. So I think that, my view about these press conferences and so on is that China should take the high ground and shouldn't engage in anything vaguely reminiscent of Donald Trump. And so I personally, if I'd been in charge of it, I would have said that's not the wise thing to do. What it was absolutely justified, though, was the criticism of Australia's behaviour. The actual form it took in terms of the image was probably a mistake, because then the argument becomes about that, when really the argument should be about Australia's behaviour in Afghanistan.
Some Afghan press have actually spoken out. An editorial by Afghanistan Times said the agonized Afghans welcome China's move not to only condemn but also react strongly over unlawful killings in Afghanistan, and we also welcome other countries' standpoint to bring the killers of innocent Afghans to justice. I want to go to Peter. What is your reaction to the very much divided voice of governments and press from different countries? For instance, the BBC obviously taken a very different stand, calling this a fake image as well, echoing the Australian perspective. But China never said this was a photograph. They just used it. Peter.
Yeah. And I think that's a side issue. The issue really is, as Martin said, about the atrocities that have taken place in Afghanistan. I think the government of Afghanistan is well within its rights to speak out with a very strong voice about those sort of things that have taken place. No country should stand by and allow that to happen. It's then when other countries start getting themselves involved and wanting to have their point of view heard. When I think in Australia this is a matter that has been under control, and there's been a very serious investigation. This came to light because there was an investigation into the matter, and there's been repercussions. There are going to be soldiers that are going to be charged with very serious crimes, and justice will take its course. When others start getting involved, that becomes the issue instead of the actual atrocities that took place. I think let's think about those families and those people and what's happened there, and allow the Afghanistan government to have their say, and for the Australian government to be mature enough to, and I think they've shown the signs that they're going to address that, but then they let themselves down by responding to Mr. Zhao's tweet. And Mr. Zhao was probably very inflammatory in actually putting it out there. But that's become the story instead of the tragedy of the deaths that took place.
Another issue that many people have is the fact that it is China who is pointing finger at the kind of mistakes, the kind of crimes or atrocities committed by Western countries, not the United States this time, but a very close ally to the United States. And some people seem to have a big problem with that. Haza, how do you look at that?
Well, I honestly think we have to put this into perspective, because Afghanistan and China share a border. So I think China is well within its rights to express an opinion about an incident that occurred in its neighbourhood, in its part of the world. And when we speak about other people getting involved, I think it's a little bit hypocritical to criticise China for doing that, because whenever an incident happens around the world that Australia does not agree with or does not condone, we always make a statement. We will always say that we do not condone actions that we disagree with. And I feel that China, in this regard, despite the photo, despite the image, despite the content of the tweet, I feel like China is within its rights to express an opinion, especially in regards to an incident that happened in a neighbouring country. And I would also like to reiterate the fact that the saddest thing about this whole affair is the fact that the focus has been taken away from the war crimes, the accused war crimes committed by Australian soldiers in Afghanistan, and it has become more about this Twitter war, which I think is a very disappointing development, especially because I watched the statement made by our Prime Minister regarding the report when it was released, and I compared that statement to his emotions and his stance when he was responding to the tweet from Mr. Zhao. And honestly, I felt disappointed that it came across as though he was more upset about the tweet than about the alleged war crimes.
Okay, looking ahead.
Personally, I think that is the wrong message that the leadership of Australia should be sending to the Australian people.
I'm really running out of time. In one sentence, if you can, so all three of you, one sentence each, what has to be done between the two countries? I really mean one sentence. Hazza, you first.
Well, I tried to do something. I expressed an apology. I feel like more Australians need to speak out and let our government know that we want to have a stable, meaningful relationship with China.
Okay. Peter.
I can remember when President Xi Jinping went to Australia only in 2015, so it's only 5 years ago, and things were on an absolute high at that time, and we've now gone down a slippery slide for whatever reason I can't figure. But I really, really wish that we could get back to those good days of cooperation with so much promise, and put aside this squabbling over things which we really shouldn't be arguing about.
Martin?
I think Australia has to reset its relationship with China.
Exactly.
Think of China, treat China with much greater respect. Otherwise, the relationship is going to continue to deteriorate, and ultimately, I think Australia will take a huge economic hit.
All right.
And it needs to wake up.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to my three guests, Hazza Hardin, Martin Jakes and Peter Arkle.